I was really inspired by what Dawn was saying as I was joining about the shift from seeing ourselves as a limited being to a realization that what's happening in the body and mind is an outcome, maybe, rather than originating in the body and mind. That is an outcome of the self, and that was a fundamental shift for me when I began to see that there's really nothing wrong with using my mind, my body, to embrace the thing that makes us human, which is our unique individuality, our expression, and that our mind, rather than being something that kind of constantly torments us, which is perhaps how it first starts off on the journey. It starts off for a lot of us, for myself included, it was that the mind was something that was just a constant barrage of useless noise. But as it progresses, as awakening deepens, it can become something, our mind can give shape and expression to that self, to our deepest recognition of what is real, what is true. And each one of us has a unique gift to give there, in that our body-mind structure is unique. It will never, ever be repeated again. And as such, it's worthwhile celebrating, rather than this kind of culture that can sometimes exist in spirituality and awakening, that the mind is just a kind of something that's gone wrong, or perhaps has just gotten out of control and really just needs to be eliminated or suppressed or something. Really, in my own journey, the only thing that was wrong with my mind was that it was trying to fix issues that it really wasn't qualified to fix. Once I kind of deeply saw that, the mind just relaxed into a more open, quiet place, in which is capable then of, we've been using this phrase recently, original thinking, thoughts that are new to you, rather than the kind of humdrum monotony of this cyclic thoughts. So it really fitted in quite well with what I wanted to really share today, what Doreen was saying before, and it really was right on a par with that awakening. What really is awakening? We're here to awaken, and what actually is that fundamentally? And it is that shift from, well, we could describe it many ways, but fundamentally it is a shift from believing ourselves to be the I that is experiencing as a separate being, that is having all these different experiences one after the other. And perhaps by the time you reach this kind of group, a gathering like this, the I that is seeking to come out of limitation and lack and suffering and to be free. And awakening really is the shift from identifying ourselves as that limited sense of self. We're all right now in this moment aware that there's a sense of experiencing happening, and there's awareness of that experiencing. And could awakening be as simple as a shift from thinking we are the experiencer to the recognition that we are the one that's aware of the experiencing going on, rather than, and with that rather comes a lack of letting go of all our limitations about ourselves. And when we begin to think of awakening in this way, it can really make this journey easier and shorter, much more fundamentally achievable. That there seems to be these two aspects of me. There seems to be this aspect that isn't growing or changing, It isn't visible. It isn't something I can really define. We could call it awareness for the sake of this discussion. But it isn't on a journey. It isn't evolving. It isn't trying to break out of suffering even. It's not limited already. It's free completely. And there is this other part of us that seems to be on a journey, that's evolving, that's changing, growing, moving towards some idea of perfection or a greater expression than we are currently experiencing. And what if those two aspects of our being remain even after awakening, the sense of experiencing, but it's seen to be a sense rather than an actual entity that we are. It's just a sense. While a body is present, while we have thoughts and emotions, there'll be a sense of being someone experiencing. But that is a temporary thing that we can embrace. It doesn't have to be something we need to eliminate. And the deepest awakening happens when this shift occurs from thinking myself to be this separate being, this someone trying to reach something, to the recognition that I am that's watching this struggle and this journey. And then the journeying of the body-mind becomes as we were saying at the start, an expression, a vehicle, a manifestation of that place that isn't growing and changing. And that's just about the most fun a human being can have, really, to be conscious of their eternal nature, that which isn't changing or growing, and also to not be in denial of any part of themselves that is still growing and changing. And that identification shift can happen suddenly. A realization, it can happen suddenly that I've never been that one that's been traveling. I've been watching this journey, and the journey comes with the body and mind. And there might always be a maturing process going on in the body and mind. But I don't have to measure myself by that. I don't have to define my progress by the limitations of my body and mind. I don't have to define myself by anything in particular. Or this shift of identity can happen in a very, very gradual way, which is much more common, I think, these days. My own experience and those that I work with, it's a much more gradual thing. So much so that we may not even recognize that that shift is happening until after it has occurred. Strange as that sounds. Many times I come across people who are expecting this big moment, this big bang to happen, where I suddenly realize with massive blinding insight that I'm not the body and mind, and I never have been. But gradually, what's going to be happening underneath, and it's really important that we really look for this, because otherwise we'll miss the most important thing. We'll miss this sense that day by day, little by little, we are actually realizing and identifying more as that unchanging place, and that it isn't growing, that there isn't going to cease to be, that it didn't appear and isn't going to disappear. How will we know then that if there's no big moment, how will we know that that shift in our identity is occurring? Well, we can see by how we are in response to our body and mind when some big emotion comes up, or when some thought process is occurring. Are we less resistant to that than we were the previous time that pattern played? Are we more curious to see what it really is? Are we more open? Are we more forgiving of ourselves and others? Are we more in touch with some quietness inside? Are we experiencing more energy, more vitality, and a sense of well-being that's growing by the day? These are the signs of an authentic awakening, where identity is shifting really into something stable, a recognition that I've never really had any distance to go myself. I've really only ever dreamt that I was this separate being, and that the coming out of that may have happened. Over and over again, sometimes I have to talk to people and tell them that they're actually much more realized than they think they are, because they're still looking at the body and mind and saying, well, there's this wrong with my mind, there's this wrong with my emotions, there's this wrong with my life, this is going on in my life still. I've got this issue and that thing happening. And they're using that as evidence to say that they're not awakened yet. It's important to recognize that that may go on for some time as we're clearing this stuff out. But the awakening may have already occurred underneath that, which is, I am not involved in that. I am watching this process. This is my expression. This is my unique expression. And maybe the identity has shifted in a much more subtle way than we expect. So I don't know why I'm telling you this tonight, but apparently it seems important to share. So it's happened several times this week already that I've had to say to someone that, if you stop and take a look at your life where you are right now, and it's probably advisable for us all to do this, whatever negative emotion you last felt, whatever thoughts happened or event happened in your life that stimulated some suffering, did you cope with it better than last time? Did you deal with it better? Did you resist it less? Did you judge yourself less for it happening? Did you be able to forgive yourself more easily, more readily? And if you did, why aren't we celebrating that? Why aren't we noticing that? And this is the shift in identity happening. That's all that needs to occur in an authentic awakening, really, is for identity to shift. Meaning, what I really know myself to be. Am I identifying as a separate being, still trying to get back home? In which case I'll feel that everything that happens to the mind and body is happening to me. I'll feel that I'm scared, or I'm unworthy, or I'm guilty, or I'm limited, or I'm in pain, or I'm waking up out of this dream. But instead, if identity shifts to recognizing I am already the awareness, the silence, the noumenon, the self, whatever we're calling that authentic nature tonight, then any of those things can happen to the body and mind, and they'll just be observed in a gentle, loving way and allowed to express and release and heal. So, could you be more awake than you realize already? It's much more common that if I took 10 people and really sat down and talked to them, I'd say at least 7 of them, maybe more sometimes, 7 or 8 of them are not recognizing just how far they've come. And there may be 1 or 2 that think they're not making any progress at all. And maybe 1 out of those 10 who think they're further ahead than they actually are, so to speak, in identity shifting. And yet, if you ask those 10 people, they'd all be terrified of being too arrogant, of thinking they're further ahead. And that's actually turned on its head so that we won't recognize just how far we've come. And it is a common issue these days with awakening, because it's happening to us in a way that we can assimilate, the way we can deal with, a way that we can handle. Can we really have these apocalyptic shifts that Ramana had when we have to get up and go to work the next day, or cook dinner for the kids, or whatever it is that we have to do, our responsibilities. Can we really have these moments where we have to go and leave life, for a year, to kind of come to grips with what we have seen, have had revealed? And Ramana had his seeing, I think it took him 3 years of being looked after to kind of become completely functional again afterwards. So is that really going to be possible for us when we're trying to hold down a job and have a family and pursue a career and everything else that we want at the same time as our awakening? Not so much. So does that mean it's not going to happen for us? Absolutely not. It just means it might be happening in a way that we're not expecting or recognizing. So, having said that, if anybody would like to ask any questions or share anything, I would like to invite you to raise your hand, and if you have a comment or anything that you want to share. It's not something I plan to talk about this evening, but it seems to spontaneously want to come, so it's all good. For me, it was more like if my attention's gradually wanting to go more and more, if there's a choosing of attention wanting to go to that silent space, as we're going to call it, for now, it's really going to be. It feels like that's the free will that we have. We have that free will to choose where to put our attention, although that may not seem like that every time we do that. But as attention goes more and more to that quiet place, then there's ironically and also more of an enjoyment of the body and mind, in that we can allow the body and mind to spontaneously function, rather than that functioning being limited by this sense that we are that body and mind, choosing to kind of identify more and more as the noumenon, as that quietness allows for freer expression of the body and mind. At first it feels like I'm kind of pulling away from the body and mind, but as that goes full circle, it's kind of a loving of the mind also, in the way that it can express itself. Yeah, and then then there really isn't a choice, but the body and mind are free to kind of express in their highest way, aren't they? Then, so you can you get to have what you had before. We really fear awakening because we don't want to lose our individuality, so to speak, or our me-ness. But that's still there. It's just functioning spontaneously, and it seemed to be just a temporary thing rather than fundamentally what we are. So that works even better when attention's resting in that silent space. We can, our humanity, our mind and body will function in the best way possible, because identity is clear, clearly established as I am watching this expression and enjoying it as well. So you kind of it starts off as trying to get away from the mind, but then it's kind of a re-embracing of that as I'm just watching the mind do its thing spontaneously. It's a lot easier that way, much more fun as well, which I think you were kind of pointing to as well. Wonderful, lovely. Okay, Sharon, whenever you're ready.
Hi.
Hi, Sharon. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm sad right now. I just got news. My brother-in-law has COVID and his organs are failing. So,
oh gosh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he's 80 though, but we're here in Pennsylvania and he's in California. And I took your advice about the Facebook thing, because I was, getting upset when people would say that, they had an opinion that there's no COVID, that it's whatever. They would say things like the vaccine is not they had opinions, and I knew I was getting set off. So I started to unfollow, and one person I unfollowed saw that, and she went into she freaked out on me. And, I pretty much, got myself out of the way and just tried to, like, not try to be right. But, I have to tell you, Helen, I'm very angry that there's no people. We're just appearance. I've seen over and over. I've seen dissolving the ego over and over. I see that. But when people are denying that there's this virus out there and now I have family that's dying, I'm upset. And yet there's no people. It's all the noumenon. So I don't know. I'm just confused. That's all.
Can you see that when someone says something to you or about you, or about COVID or anything actually in general, that they can only really they can't hurt you, they can hurt what you think about
Right.
them or yourself, and if you can kind of see that you obviously there's a wish for this situation to not be occurring, a wish for your family to not be suffering, and this other person's response is kind of working against that, seems to be diminishing that, in a kind of dismissive way, perhaps, to say, well, that there isn't such a thing as a virus. It's pushing against your desires and wishes for this situation, isn't it?
I guess I wonder if it's just like, there's so many times in the process I would just look and say, well, that's what they're believing. They're believing their thoughts, and I would be able to just walk away. But recently, I think that I'm just going deeper into the ego's, hell. That's what I'm seeing anyway, because it seems like there's more, the ego, the core of the ego gets a little bit more feisty, more dramatic.
Yes, it does. And can this anger that you're feeling be really more of a sense that you're listening to some external voice and allowing it to dictate what you want out of this situation, what you feel, allowing it to some external, some other being that is really trying to tell you how you should think or feel in this particular situation, let's just say, and what you should want. You probably find that is underneath that is the reason for the anger. You want what you want in this situation, and you have a strong desire in this situation. And if you don't allow that external voice to influence how you feel, the anger will disappear. There's a feeling of being disempowered by this other being because you're allowing them to have an influence upon you. Right. It doesn't feel like you're allowing it. It feels like it's happening outside of your control, but you can. But
aren't they me? Aren't they me? Because there's nobody in my dream that's not.
Yes, but you also have to respect the unique way that the self is appearing as you. What you want in this moment is the self appearing as you, isn't it? As a human being wanting the best for this person that's suffering, or whatever way it's appearing. So just be careful not to override what you want, by saying, well, this person is me too, I should. It still doesn't mean you have to agree and kind of passively accept what everyone else says. Mm-hmm. It's a recognition that all of this is me, but in that I also have to honor how the self is appearing as this particular body mind and what it's feeling right now in this moment. And you are always your own best authority on that. There's a reason that you feel this particular way. There's a reason why that's happening right now. Sure. And what this core of the ego is that you were mentioning is this kind of sense of being affected by other beings, being impinged upon by other beings, being limited by still listening to an external voice rather than sort of being around reference source completely. It's a work in progress, isn't it, for most of us?
It is, and I mentioned Helen Avery was on today, and I was mentioning that, I sense a lot of terror now about not being Sharon. Like, in other words, like that I, never really existed as a person, and so that might be driving it too. Because there's this argument that it's unconscious, but you helped the other last week when you said the subconscious is the noumenon too, so I can be gentler with it. I used to be afraid of my subconscious, because of all the different things that had happened to me. So now I can look at it differently, and I can also like love that other person that's just maybe fearful in their own way. Who knows? Why do they have to agree with a story? It's just that
everybody has to, if they feel separate and they feel unsafe or unworthy on a deep level, they'll be trying to make themselves feel more in control, more empowered somehow. We all do that until we don't. However, we don't have to be affected by somebody else trying to do that to us, when we won't have this anger that's going on inside sometimes.
Yeah. And let me ask you this, like, as an awakened being, you see there is this virus, right? It's not like there's not. Why are other people thinking there's not a virus? It's just nothing. Well,
people think all kinds of things, right? And that's the individuality of the self, is it can appear however it wants to appear as a human being.
Okay.
It can have all kinds of ideas.
Right.
Some we might agree with, some we might disagree with. All of that is the one being, but we're still free to kind of decide what we're going to reference as useful and not useful. We can decide that that's not a useful thing for us without pushing against it also, can't we?
Yes,
we don't have to kind of go into opposition with it, otherwise we suffer then.
And I think that's what I want. I think that because I'm so terrified that I really don't exist, that I rather suffer than feel that terror. I think there's some kind of battle going on here.
The fear of the fear that we come up against, this never not being a separate being, you have to remind yourself that you're only seeing how you've always been. There's no end or death to this separate being because it never was there. It's vital to remember that, to get around the terror, because otherwise you're fearing something ending that never really existed. It's always been the one self, the infinite being, but it's just had these crazy ideas about itself that it was separate and limited. When you really get that, it takes the fear out of it, that nothing's going to die or end. It's just a dissolution into a more fluid functioning of that egoic sense of self, so that it can be this vehicle expression of the one being, rather than if you look and see there isn't a separate being and go, oh my gosh, we get this idea that something's got to die then. But there'll always be a sense of being someone while there's a body there.
Mm-hmm.
Because the sense perception, there's a capacity to think and to feel emotions that gives the sense of being someone. And that's not a mistake. That's the beautiful individual way that the self can express. So if we stop trying to get rid of that, it's enough to see it's not an actual, real, separate being. It never was either. I'm just coming to see clearly how I've always been, and the fear begins to lift.
But how about the emotions? Like this man is, he's my brother-in-law, and I'm suffering. I just feel empathy and a lot of things, and I guess I'm not there where you are, so where I'm feeling right now is a lot of deep sadness.
If somebody passed away, in my experience, there's this cliche, this idea about awakened beings that they only feel peace, love, and joy if someone passed. I don't know what I would feel. I might be sad too. I might grieve as well as being peaceful. I don't know what that would look like in that moment, but whatever it looked like, I wouldn't be able to suppress it. I wouldn't be able to say it shouldn't be this way or it should be this way. It's a full embracing of what it means to be a human being as well, an expression of the one being as a human being. What that looks like in any moment, we don't know, but it will feel authentic if it's expressed. So if you stop putting conditions on yourself and saying, I shouldn't, if you grieve, you grieve. If something happens like that, or there's some negative emotion, I don't know what you're supposed to look like in the next moment. So, why should you know?
Right.
And you'll find out what you're supposed to be like in that moment when it happens, won't you? And if that's some sadness, that's sadness, isn't it? But there'll be peace as well. It is the major difference. That sadness will be happening inside peace. It won't be you that's sad. It'll just be the sense of grieving or something happening. And
this is so helpful. I'm so glad, because it just all this came just now when you came in on. I didn't know. I knew he had COVID, but I didn't know he was dying. That my husband just told me his organs are failing. So
just watch the cliches and the ideas about what awakened beings are.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Awakened beings don't have any clue how they're supposed to be at all. They find out as they go. And that may look like a normal human being grieving in that moment from the outside, to somebody else. Can you not also embrace the sense of someone who feels a loss? The sense of you who feels that they've experienced a loss or something. It's very important, isn't it?
That was so helpful.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay, Doreen, when you're ready.
Hi, Helen.
Hi.
I just wanted to echo what you shared when you started today about how we may not know that shifting is happening, or awakening is happening, because it occurred to me, or it happened to me last night. I was been contemplating the question, how far do I reach?
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that, every day I would write, even if it's just a little something every day.
Yeah.
But on Monday, I decided, I was writing about it, and I just wanted to be real and raw and authentic, and really like, what am I really, really feeling about this? And I ended up with this awareness that I had a huge resistance to embracing oneness. And the guidance at the end was, so for the next day, be with resistance, just be with resistance. Yeah. And so had my day yesterday, and it was really, really, really late last night where I was going to, do my writing about this. And the first thing I wrote was, I forgot to be with resistance. And it was, it's like I had forgot about the teaching all day. And so as I continued to write about it, I realized that I forgot about resistance because I didn't experience any. Mm-hmm. And I also didn't have and I started reflecting on my interactions with others, and I realized I didn't really have any challenges and interactions with others today. And it was smooth and flowing. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I realized, I did not have an experience of separation today.
Yeah.
And now I can also say I didn't have an experience of oneness either. It was just like this kind of middle. It's like, it was just like middle ground. And so,
what would experience of oneness look like? What would the oneness feel like if you were to have it? Would it not be just kind of gliding through the day, not really getting snagged on anything?
Well, and what you just said is exactly how I think I'm unaware of what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't identified that yet. It's like, I noticed that I was wanting to be more generous and having ideas to be more generous and helping others. So all that was happening. And the last thing I wrote last night, which is really funny as I look at it right now, because confirmation came today, it's like what I wrote, I was like, I don't even know if this has anything to do with how far I reach, which obviously it does. But
It really
it's so
does, yeah.
interesting to me that the awareness that shift is happening, and how if I had not sat down to write about it last night, I would not be aware
Yeah.
that shift was happening.
And who knows how long you would have gone, maybe a month or 6 months before you'd even stop to check in again and see,
Yeah.
and the experience of, it's not an experience, but the oneness, it's very, very simple thing, isn't it? It can easily miss, like there's just awareness. I'm just aware. And then I look back after, like I go to bed that night and there's just awareness. There's no awareness of where I feel I stop here and another being starts, where I can be in resistance or something. So I might have gone through the whole day just being aware for long periods of time with nothing, no separate, I'm aware of, that might have just fallen away for a long period during the waking state. And I might not realize if I'm not looking for, or if I'm expecting some big flashy experience where it suddenly happened like that. It's so good that you've noticed that. That's really,
Yeah. And then, and with Helen's program earlier, she was sharing a similar experience with made me. I was like, oh, and then you shared the same thing, and I'm like, okay. So it's just confirmation today, and I am noticing that, I don't know, certain things are just kind of flowing, and certain things are showing up that I've been asking for or needing, or so. Anyway, I just wanted to echo what you shared, that I had that experience, or having that experience.
it's so good if you like you did. It gets me really excited, this, because it really shows just how possible awakening is. And it's actually happening without us realizing. We all have this misconception, don't we, that we'll know when it's occurring, and it wasn't like that for me at all. It was only afterwards, in hindsight, when some big emotion happened and there was just no capacity to push against it at all. But I really didn't realize that it shifted until this emotion came up, or there was just nothing within me that wanted to deny the authenticity of that emotion in that moment. And when I looked back then, I realized that it'd be quite some time since I'd actually suffered from anything. And it's not what we expect, is it? We kind of, wow, this whole day, pretty much I've just been aware. There's just awareness with no division, no separation. But I tend to, as human beings, we tend to pay attention to where we got separated. We remember where we suffered. We remember where we divided ourselves again. And berate ourselves about the 5 minutes out of 5 hours where we were in a separate state of separation.
Yeah. It's interesting because right before I was about to write, because I read what I wrote the day before, and I had this moment of like, darn, Doreen, you didn't even focus on this. I went into judgment about not focusing on it all day. And then when I start to write, that's when I was aware. I was like, whoa, something is shifting.
It's really important as well. I want to carry on this topic because it's so important. If you write a journal or keep a journal, and you go to write at the end of the day, or you look at what you've written that day and there's nothing in there, is that because we're not paying attention or stubbornly avoiding looking at something, or is it just because there was nothing to look at that day? Nothing came up. There was just the unbroken awareness, and with that comes this manifestation of things that you want, like you were saying, and just this sort of effortless gliding through the day more and more. And it's very normal, isn't it, when it happens, that it doesn't feel spectacular at first. It's only when we kind of realize, well, there's something really different about that to how I normally experience myself. Because there's no time in that awareness, no memory, no separate experiencing. We don't recall that. We only, like in deep sleep, we don't recall time. There isn't any time passing then. In the waking state, when we're just in that undivided place, you just kind of like, I haven't really been suffering for quite some time. I couldn't tell you how much. It's really, really good to hear. It gets me excited. It's such a simple thing, awakening, isn't it? That it can happen so quietly in the background that we're just not aware of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good to hear your progress. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, would anyone else like to ask a question or to share something? If not, we can do, might be nice to do a nice short meditation, nice guided meditation. So, let's just take a moment here, all of us together, to we can actually spend some time just looking at exactly what we were talking about, that right now, present for everyone, the fact that you can know what your eyes are seeing and what your ears are hearing is evidence that there's this quiet awareness present right now in your experience. And that awareness that watches thoughts, watches the presence of thoughts or absence of thoughts, is here all the time. And it even watches at night time. It watches the absence of time and sense perception and experiencing. Just noticing that awareness can be present without anything to be aware of. We don't need anything to be aware of. We don't need to be experiencing as a separate being. And the more that we simply notice this awareness, the more we begin to find it, it's much more effortless and easy just to be aware. The simplest state of all is just being aware. And that we don't have to always be aware of something. We don't have to always be watching something. Just noticing that you're effortlessly hearing these words, that you are noticing whether your eyes are open or closed, that there is this awareness present. It's silent, it's still in the background, but it's always here. Right now you know whether your mind is thinking or not, whether there's thoughts or no thoughts, whether there's emotion or no emotion. You know that your senses are perceiving, your heart is beating, your body is regulating itself, doing everything it needs to. And effortlessly there is awareness of all of this. It's enough just to bring attention to that awareness, just to recognize. It's unnoticed for quite some time within us because it's quiet, because it's not moving, because it's not changing, because it's constant and it's stable. And just gradually, more and more throughout our day, we'll find, as we bring attention back to this awareness, we'll find that more and more there is just awareness. And that less and less of the time, there's a me that's aware of something else. Gradually the self is just switching over back to its natural functioning, its effortless state of just being aware. Notice that you can hear these words and understand them. You're aware of them without having to think about them, without having to engage in a separate mode as a separate being. Your senses still function, your body still operates perfectly, while you're just aware. And thoughts can come and go. Positive and negative states can come and go. Just passing by this awareness, which isn't coming and going. We don't need to force anything, just enough to recognize awareness is here. That same awareness is listening to these words as he's speaking these words. Awareness doesn't need any support at all. It doesn't even need any object to be aware of. And just like at night time, there's just awareness of the body sleeping. We can experience that same peace now, and there's just awareness. We don't have to automatically go into being a separate being. Just enjoying, recognizing the simplicity of just being aware. Whatever we experience, the thoughts come and go. Awareness is the constant, the watching, observing. Just enjoying how it feels to just be aware. We don't need to understand awareness to be it. We don't need to get rid of anything else to be awareness. It's just enough to notice it's here. It's watching a busy mind or a quiet mind the same. It's unchanged. It's watching a calm and peaceful body or a restless, agitated body. It is undisturbed either way. Awareness simply is. It didn't arrive and it doesn't leave. Awareness is simply starting to enjoy noticing itself rather than thoughts, experiences all the time. Resting in its undivided state. Nothing to be aware of, just awareness. And everything still functions perfectly. We don't need to be aware of the body especially for it to work. We don't need to be aware of the mind especially for it to function. all that will just happen in the awareness. Just this original state, just aware. Already free, already expansive, and completely normal, completely now. Nothing to achieve and nowhere to go, just here. Just being aware. Recognizing the unchanging awareness. You are that awareness. And you are everything that rises from it. So, as our time together comes to an end this evening, or this afternoon, wherever your body is, let's make a commitment to ourselves to just gently recognize, notice, remember, as we move through our day, this original state. Such a simple thing to recognize. And as we do so, our body and mind will feel ever greater peace and relaxation. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. Namaste. Thank you.